My name is Sebastian Mitchell, and I'm a 30-year-old wildlife photographer from Nashville, Tennessee. What I'm about to share with you has haunted me for the past 8 months. I've debated whether to document these events, partly because I doubt anyone will believe me, and partly because putting it into words makes it real in a way I've been trying to deny. But the nightmares won't stop, and maybe writing this down will help me process what happened, or at least serve as a warning to others. It began last October during what was supposed to be a 3-week photography expedition in the most remote sections of the Great Smoky Mountains. I'd been planning this trip for over a year, meticulously mapping routes to locations few people ever visit. As a freelancer specializing in wilderness photography, I've built my reputation on capturing images from places others can't or won't access. The first week went exactly as planned. The autumn colors were at their peak, brilliant reds and golds set against the deep green of the pines. I'd hiked about 15 miles from the nearest ranger station, following game trails and using topographical maps to navigate to a series of pristine waterfalls I'd heard about from a local guide. The isolation was perfect. I hadn't seen another human being in 5 days. On the 8th day, I noticed something strange. I was reviewing my photographs from that morning when I spotted an anomaly in the background of several shots. A dark shape partially hidden behind trees, present in 3 consecutive images taken about 2 minutes apart. At first, I assumed it was a bear, but zooming in revealed something odd about its posture. It seemed to be standing too upright, its proportions not quite right for any animal native to these mountains. I dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow, a mistake that would cost me dearly. That evening, I made camp near a small mountain stream, pitched my tent, and built a fire. The temperature was dropping faster than forecast, and a thick fog had settled into the valley below. As darkness fell, I noticed the forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No crickets chirping, no owls calling, not even the rustle of nocturnal creatures moving through the underbrush. Just absolute oppressive silence. Anyone who's spent time in the wilderness knows this silence is a warning. When the forest goes quiet, it means something has spooked the wildlife, usually a predator. I added more wood to my fire and checked that my bear spray was within reach, though some instinct told me I wasn't dealing with a bear. I tried to sleep but kept jolting awake at the slightest sound. Around 1 a.m., I heard it, splashing in the stream about 50 yards from my tent. Slow, deliberate movements, like something large wading through the shallow water. I lay perfectly still, listening as it moved closer to my campsite. The splashing stopped, replaced by the soft crunch of leaves under heavy footsteps. Whatever it was now on land and approaching my tent. I reached for my flashlight, debating whether to turn it on or remain hidden in darkness. The footsteps circled my campsite once, twice, 3 times, each circuit bringing them closer to my tent. Then I heard it breathe, deep, ragged inhalations that sounded almost hungry. Not the breathing of any animal I recognized. It paused directly outside my tent, so close I could see the shadow of its form cast by the dying embers of my fire. The silhouette was massive, easily 7 feet tall, and standing on 2 legs. A low growl rumbled from its throat, vibrating through the ground beneath me. My entire body went rigid with primal fear. The thing sniffed loudly, taking in my scent. I knew the only thing separating us was a thin layer of nylon, absurdly inadequate protection from whatever was out there. It moved again, circling my tent one more time before retreating into the forest. I didn't sleep for the remainder of the night, lying awake with my hunting knife clutched in one hand and my bear spray in the other, listening for any sound of its return. At first light, I cautiously unzipped my tent and surveyed my surroundings. The forest seemed normal again, birds chirping as they flitted between branches. I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole encounter until I saw the tracks. They circled my campsite exactly as I'd heard the creature move during the night. Near the fire pit, they were clearly defined in the soft earth, prints that resembled a wolf's but impossibly large, with claw marks extending from what should have been toe pads. Most disturbing of all, in some places the tracks seemed to change, becoming more elongated and human-like. I should have packed up immediately and hiked back to civilization. That would have been the rational response. Instead, my curiosity as a photographer overrode my fear. What if I could capture evidence of whatever this was? It could be the discovery of a lifetime. I spent the day hiking to a nearby ridge, constantly scanning my surroundings and jumping at every sound. I set up camera traps at various points around what would be my new campsite, about 2 miles from the previous location. If the creature returned, maybe I could capture it on film. As the sun began to set, I realized with a chill that it was the night of the full moon. I'm not superstitious by nature, but given what I'd experienced, the coincidence unsettled me. I built my fire larger than usual, creating a wide perimeter of light around my tent. The silence descended again as darkness fell. I sat by the fire, straining to hear anything over the crackling of the flames. Hours passed with nothing but the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Perhaps whatever had visited the previous night had moved on. Around midnight, exhaustion overcame vigilance, and I retreated to my tent, falling into an uneasy sleep. The scream woke me, a human scream, high-pitched and terrified, coming from somewhere in the valley below. I bolted upright, heart pounding. There shouldn't be anyone else out here. I was miles from the nearest trail. The scream came again, followed by a sound that froze my blood. That same rumbling growl from the night before, but louder now, triumphant. I should have stayed in my tent. I should have made myself as small and quiet as possible. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and camera and unzipped the tent, driven by some misguided sense of responsibility. What if someone was in danger? Could I live with myself if I did nothing? The full moon illuminated the forest with an eerie silver glow, casting sharp black shadows between the trees. I played my flashlight beam across the underbrush, seeing nothing unusual. The screaming had stopped, leaving only that terrible silence. I followed a game trail leading down into the valley, moving as quietly as possible. About a quarter mile from my camp, I smelled it, the unmistakable metallic odor of fresh blood, heavy in the night air. My light caught a splash of crimson on a fallen log, then another on a tree trunk, a trail of blood leading deeper into the forest. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed forward, following the grisly trail. I rounded a large boulder and stopped dead in my tracks. In a small clearing ahead lay the remains of what had once been a man. His camping gear was scattered around, torn and bloody. His body was barely recognizable as human, ripped apart with savage violence. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. As I turned to flee, my light caught a pair of eyes watching me from the tree line. Amber eyes reflecting the beam like glowing coals, set in a face that was neither man nor wolf, but some nightmarish combination of both. It stepped forward into the moonlight, and I saw it clearly for the first time. Standing on two legs, it towered over me, at least 8 feet tall with its massive shoulders hunched forward. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur, but its proportions were all wrong. Too lean in the waist, too broad in the chest, arms too long, and ending in what looked disturbingly like hands, though the fingers terminated in curved, yellowed claws. Its face was the most horrifying part. A wolf's muzzle stretched over what seemed like a human skull. Lips pulled back to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Blood dripped from its jaws, fresh from its kill. But the eyes were the worst part. There was intelligence there, cold and calculating. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. It knew exactly what it was doing. I raised my camera on pure reflex and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the creature in stark detail for a split second. It recoiled, snarling in rage, then dropped to all fours in charge. I ran. I've never run so fast in my life, crashing through underbrush, leaping over fallen logs, my lungs burning and heart threatening to burst from my chest. I could hear it behind me, moving with impossible speed, closing the distance with each passing second. The trees thinned ahead, revealing a steep slope leading down to a river about 30 feet below. Without hesitation, I threw myself over the edge, half sliding, half falling down the embankment. Jagged rocks tore at my clothes and skin, but I barely felt the pain. I hit the water hard, the shock of the cold momentarily paralyzing me before survival instinct kicked in. The current was strong, pulling me downstream as I struggled to keep my head above water. I looked back toward the bank and saw the creature pacing along the edge, reluctant to follow me into the water. It let out a howl of frustration that echoed across the valley, a sound that started like a wolf's call, but morphed into something almost human, a wailing cry that raised the hair on my neck. The river carried me around a bend, and I lost sight of the creature. I fought my way to the opposite bank and dragged myself onto the rocky shore, shivering violently from cold and shock. I'd lost my flashlight in the river, but my waterproof camera bag had somehow remained strapped to my shoulder. I needed shelter. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and in my wet clothes, hypothermia was a real danger. In the distance, I spotted what looked like an old mining entrance cut into the hillside. It wasn't ideal, but it would provide protection from the elements and, hopefully, from the creature still hunting me. The mine shaft extended about 20 feet into the hillside before ending in a cave-in. It was dry inside, though the musty smell of decay and the scattered animal bones suggested it occasionally served as a predator's den. I prayed it was currently unoccupied as I huddled against the far wall, trying to stop shaking. I don't know how long I sat there in the darkness, straining to hear any sound of pursuit over my own ragged breathing. Eventually, exhaustion overcame fear, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. I awoke to gray dawn light filtering into the mine entrance. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was or why. Then it all came flooding back. The creature, the mutilated body, my desperate flight. I checked my camera with trembling hands, praying the waterproof case had done its job. The camera powered on, and I navigated to the last photo taken. There it was, blurry and partially obscured by the flash reflection, but unmistakable. A bipedal, wolf-like creature caught mid-snarl, blood matting the fur around its muzzle. Proof that I wasn't insane, that what I'd seen was real. I waited until the sun was fully up before venturing outside. The forest seemed peaceful in the morning light, birds singing as if the horrors of the night had never happened. I had no idea where I was. The river had carried me far from my campsite, and I'd lost most of my gear. My phone had no signal, and my GPS unit was back at camp. I followed the river downstream, reasoning that all waterways in the region eventually led to populated areas. After several hours of hiking, I spotted a thin column of smoke rising above the trees ahead. Approaching cautiously, I discovered a small cabin with an old pickup truck parked outside. The owner was an elderly man named Ray, who'd lived in these mountains his entire life. He seemed unsurprised by my bedraggled appearance, offering me coffee and dry clothes without asking questions. When I finally explained that I'd gotten lost after being chased by what I thought was a large predator, possibly a bear, he gave me a long, evaluating look. "Wasn't no bear," he said finally. "Not if you saw what I think you saw." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Ray sighed heavily and gestured for me to sit. "These mountains keep secrets, son. Things the rangers don't put in their brochures. Every few years, people go missing. Hikers, campers, sometimes locals who should know better than to be out after dark during the full moon." He told me stories passed down through generations of families in the region. Tales of a creature that walked like a man but hunted like a wolf. The Cherokee had legends about it, he said, warnings about a Wendigo or skinwalker that haunted these forests. "Most folks who see it don't live to tell about it," Ray said, eyeing me curiously. "You're either very lucky or very unlucky. Depends on whether it decides to come looking for you." He drove me to the nearest ranger station, where I reported finding a dead hiker in the woods. I didn't mention the creature, claiming instead that I'd gotten lost after fleeing what I thought was a bear. They sent out a search party but found nothing. No body, no blood, no evidence of the violent scene I'd witnessed. My campsite was located, my gear mostly intact except for my camera traps, which had been destroyed, the memory cards missing. The official report listed the incident as a case of wilderness panic, suggesting I'd become disoriented and imagined threats that weren't there. The photograph I'd taken might have convinced them, but when I checked my camera again, the image was gone, deleted somehow, though I hadn't touched the camera since checking it in the mine. I returned to Nashville, tried to resume my normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. I found myself jumping at shadows, unable to sleep without lights on, drinking too much to quiet the memories. I researched legends of werewolves and skinwalkers obsessively, looking for any information that might explain what I'd encountered. 3 weeks after returning home, I noticed a stray dog lingering around my apartment building. A large, dark-furred beast with unusual amber eyes. It was there every morning when I left for work and every evening when I returned. Just watching, waiting. The neighbors commented on it, but animal control could never seem to find it when they came looking. I started seeing a therapist who diagnosed me with PTSD and prescribed medication that dulled the edges of my fear, but couldn't erase what I knew to be true. I told myself it was over, that I was safe in the city, surrounded by people and concrete and civilization. Then the postcards started arriving, one each month with no return address, pictures of the Great Smoky Mountains, of dense forests and misty valleys. No message, just a single muddy paw print pressed into the corner of each card. 2 months ago, I received a different card, a photograph of my apartment building, taken from across the street. My window was circled in red. On the back, scratched in jagged letters that barely looked human, "Soon." I moved the next day, left no forwarding address, told no one where I was going. I've been living in hotels since then, never staying more than a few nights in one place. I change cities weekly, zigzagging across the country, but I can't shake the feeling that it's following me, that those amber eyes are watching me from the shadows. Last night, I woke to the sound of scratching at my hotel room door. Soft at first, then more insistent. I held my breath, praying it would go away. Then a low growl came from the hallway, and a voice, a horrible, guttural approximation of human speech, called my name. Sebastian. I'm writing this now as a record, a warning. If something happens to me, at least someone will know the truth. Tonight is the full moon again. I've barricaded the door and windows of my room, but I know it won't be enough if it truly wants to get in. I can hear it outside now, circling the building, waiting, hunting. If you're ever in the remote parts of the Great Smoky Mountains, stay on the marked trails. Don't camp alone. And whatever you do, get to shelter before the full moon rises. There are things in those ancient forests that defy explanation, predators that view humans as nothing more than prey. And if you ever see amber eyes watching you from the tree line, run. Don't look back, don't stop, don't try to reason with it or fight it. Just run, because once it has your scent, it never forgets, and it never stops hunting.